il terzo, attenzione, arriva, batti, gol, e gol, e gol, e gol, e gol.
Yes, Gabriel Batistuta, the man who shattered nets with his thunderous right foot, who made defenders tremble and goalkeepers pray, found himself, years after the applause had faded, crawling to the bathroom at night, unable to stand. I scored goals for a living, he said, but now I can't even walk. They called him Batigol, a warrior in Fiorentina's purple, a beast in Argentina's white and blue. He wasn't just a striker, he was an explosion in human form. With a ponytail bouncing behind him like a wild horse and a right foot like a cannon, Batistuta didn't just score, he punished. He made goals look like declarations of war. And yet, behind that furious elegance, something sinister was always lurking. A body slowly breaking, piece by piece, under the weight of glory. While fans adored the goals, the celebrations, the loyalty, no one saw the bones crack, the ligaments scream, the man collapsing in silence once the cameras were off. This is not just the story of one of the greatest strikers in football history. This is the tale of a legend who gave everything until there was nothing left, not even the ability to stand upright. Why did he keep playing while in pain? Why did he never win the recognition his brilliance deserved? Why did football, the game he loved so deeply, betray him so cruelly? Tonight, we dive into the beautiful tragedy of Gabriel Batistuta, the legend who couldn't walk. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Argentina was still living in the long shadows cast by Diego Maradona. The footballing world was split between the afterglow of Maradona's 1986 World Cup miracle and the rising dawn of Europe's golden age of club football. Serie A, in particular, had become the beating heart of the sport, a ruthless, tactical battlefield filled with legends. Baresi, Maldini, Van Basten, Baggio, and soon Batistuta. Gabriel Omar Batistuta emerged not from the spotlight of Buenos Aires, but from Reconquista, a small city in Santa Fe province, far from the capital's glamour. He didn't grow up dreaming of becoming the next Maradona. In fact, he was drawn to basketball at first, idolizing Michael Jordan more than Diego. Football found him late, and once it did, it devoured him whole. He was raw, powerful, almost untamed. Boca Juniors recognized his potential, and later, so did Fiorentina. But in those early years, Batistuta wasn't yet Batigol. He was a promising striker, still learning how to mold his brute strength into clinical fury. When he arrived in Italy in 1991, Fiorentina was not among the giants. They weren't Juventus, Milan, or Inter. But Batistuta turned them into a team worth fearing. In his first season, he scored 13 goals. Not extraordinary, but there was something in his movement, his aggression, his hunger, that made fans believe. What followed were 9 seasons of devotion. While other stars chased silverware, Batistuta stayed in Florence, even when Fiorentina were relegated in 1993. That moment, when a world-class striker chose loyalty over trophies, defined him. It was a rare sight in a sport increasingly ruled by money and ambition. But it came at a price. While contemporaries like Ronaldo Nazario, Shevchenko, and Raul were lifting Champions League titles and World Cups, Batistuta was giving everything to a club that could give him little in return. His body endured weekly punishment against Serie A's most savage defenders on pitches where tackles were often closer to assaults. Still, he scored, again and again, with his head, his left foot, but most devastatingly, with that right cannon that could tear through nets. At the international level, he was Argentina's spear. In the 1994 World Cup, he scored a hat-trick in Argentina's opening match, an explosive reminder that not all brilliance came from Maradona's left foot. After Diego was suspended for doping later in the tournament, Batistuta became the nation's reluctant talisman. Again, he delivered. Again, it wasn't enough. Twice, in 1995 and 1997, he led Argentina to the Copa America finals. Twice, they fell short. Batistuta was the type of player who did not seek to be worshipped. He wasn't poetic like Baggio or divine like Zinedine Zidane. He was a warrior, one of the last true number 9s, a dying breed of strikers who battled for every inch and let their boots speak. But underneath the goals and the growls, something was wrong. As early as the mid-1990s, Batistuta was reportedly taking injections just to play. Cortisone, painkillers, anything that would keep him running. The fans saw a lion, but the lion was bleeding. By the time he finally left Fiorentina in 2000 to join Roma, lured by the chance of winning a Serie A title, his body was already betraying him. He was still scoring goals, still frightening defenders, but the price of those goals was growing unbearable. When Roma won the Scudetto in 2001, it should have been his ultimate redemption. But for Batistuta, it was more like the closing scene of a tragedy. He had finally conquered Italy, but it had nearly destroyed him to get there. That same year, in the 2002 World Cup, he became the only player in history to score a hat-trick in 2 different World Cups. Yet, Argentina were eliminated in the group stage. He retired from international duty shortly after. Still, no one, not even his closest teammates, truly understood the physical hell he had been enduring. Because Batistuta never complained, never flopped, never showed pain. He was a man from a different time. By the time he retired in 2005, Gabriel Batistuta had scored over 300 goals. He was and still is Argentina's second highest all-time top scorer, only eclipsed by Messi. But the years of silent suffering were just beginning to reveal themselves. What happens to the body of a man who plays through fire for a decade? In Batistuta's case, the answer was chilling. Constant agony, broken ankles, collapsed cartilage, and joints that screamed even when he stood still. He had become a prisoner of his own greatness. He once admitted he had to time his toilet breaks, crawling there on his hands, because his legs wouldn't carry him. In 2013, he asked a surgeon to cut off his legs, unable to endure the pain any longer. No one clapped anymore. No one roared his name. But the pain didn't stop. This was the quiet consequence of greatness. The scandal, if there ever was one, wasn't in drugs or betrayal, but in the silence football demanded from its heroes. And Batistuta was nothing if not a loyal soldier to the end. But as we move forward into the rise and fall of this legend, we begin to ask, was it worth it? There's something poetic and cruel about watching a warrior fall. Not in battle, where the defeat is noble, but after the war is won, when no one is watching and the pain finally catches up. That was Gabriel Batistuta's story, a rise that was as explosive as his right foot, and a fall so silent that the world almost missed it. Batistuta's ascent in the early 90s was meteoric. After a brief spell with River Plate and Boca Juniors in Argentina, it was his move to Fiorentina that set the tone for what would become a cult legacy. In Florence, he wasn't just a striker. He was a symbol of hope, passion, and wild beauty. He wasn't refined like Van Basten or technical like Del Piero. He was raw destruction, a storm with a ponytail. From 1991 to 2000, he was the heart of Fiorentina. In 1994-95, he scored in 11 consecutive Serie A matches, setting a record that stood for decades. His goals were not just statistics, they were events. Often from impossible angles, at absurd speed, and with a venom that left keepers rooted. The fans called him Rey León, the Lion King, and it fit. But even as he roared, the cracks were forming. Serie A in the 1990s was a battlefield. Defenders like Cannavaro, Thuram, Nesta, they didn't just mark you, they hunted you. For a striker like Batistuta, every game was survival. And he paid the price with his body. Sprained ankles, torn ligaments, deep bruises, most hidden under socks and silence. In 1993, Fiorentina were relegated. Most stars would have walked away. But Batistuta stayed, not for money, not for glory, but out of loyalty. That season, he played in Serie B, scoring 16 goals and dragging the club back to the top flight. It should have made headlines. Instead, it barely made whispers. And that was the story of his career. Underappreciated, undervalued, even as he burned stadiums down with his fire. Then came 2000. At age 31, with time running out, Batistuta finally made a move. Roma offered him a lifeline, a chance to finally win a major title. The transfer fee at €36.2 million was a record for a player of his age. Critics said it was a desperate gamble. Batistuta silenced them all. In his first season, he scored 20 goals. More importantly, Roma won the Serie A title, their first in nearly 2 decades. He cried. Fans cried. It was as if the football gods had finally remembered to reward him. But it was also the beginning of the end. The injuries that had stalked him in Florence now ambushed him in Rome. Knee pain became unbearable. He started missing games. His trademark power seemed dulled. The lion was limping. Roma knew. He knew. But no one said it out loud. In 2003, he left Roma for Inter. a move that never should have happened. He played only a handful of games before drifting into the Qatar Stars League, chasing one last paycheck and delaying the inevitable goodbye. It was there, in the quiet sands of the Middle East, that Batistuta's body finally betrayed him completely. By 2005, at 36, he retired. But the real fall came after. Post-retirement, Batistuta disappeared from the spotlight. While many of his contemporaries moved into coaching, punditry, or glamorized ambassador roles, he vanished. Occasionally, a quote would emerge, always humble, always reflective. And then, in 2013, the truth surfaced. He confessed he could barely walk. He told Argentine media he would crawl at night, that he had no cartilage in his ankles, that his bones were grinding against each other like sandpaper. He was taking heavy painkillers just to get out of bed. Doctors had tried fusing bones, reattaching ligaments. Nothing worked. And then he asked a surgeon to amputate his legs. Let that sink in. A man who once leapt into the air in World Cup ecstasy, who once smashed in goals from 30 yards, was now pleading to have his legs removed. Not out of despair, but because the pain was too monstrous to bear. This wasn't a fall from grace. This was a collapse into a personal hell. Fans, stunned, rallied around him. Journalists wrote tributes. Fiorentina offered support. But it was too late. The damage was done. The football world had watched Gabriel Batistuta rise like a gladiator, but no one had watched him bleed. Even the Argentina national team, the one he had scored 54 goals for, once a record, rarely acknowledged him after his retirement. There were no statues, no testimonials, just silence. In the shadows, Batistuta began to recover slowly. Surgeries, therapy, lifestyle changes, all in the hope of reclaiming basic movement. Walking, not running, sleeping without screaming, sitting without spasms. The victories now were microscopic, but for a man who had conquered Europe's toughest league, they were everything. The fall of Batistuta wasn't dramatic or scandalous in the traditional sense. There was no doping, no betrayal, no crime. But it was tragic in its own way. A cautionary tale of what happens when a man gives too much for a game that rarely gives back. As we approach the darkest part of this journey, we're left with a haunting question. What does it mean to be a legend if the cost is your own body? Gabriel Batistuta never screamed on the pitch. He never clutched his face or rolled across the grass like so many modern stars. Even when he limped, he did so with a warrior's pride, head held high, lips sealed tight. But behind closed doors, long after the floodlights dimmed and the fans forgot, he screamed. Not out of fear, but pain. In 2013, nearly a decade after his retirement, the world discovered the terrible truth. Batistuta was broken. Not metaphorically, literally. His ankles were pulverized, his cartilage gone. He couldn't stand for more than a few minutes, couldn't walk, couldn't sleep. Every step was like walking on knives. I was in so much pain, he said in a now famous interview. I went to the doctor and told him to cut off my legs. I couldn't bear it anymore. It sounded like a sick joke, but it wasn't. The man who once struck fear into defenders, who launched thunderbolts from 30 yards, was crawling to the toilet in the middle of the night because his own legs had become cages of suffering. He wasn't exaggerating. Batistuta, the once great gladiator, had become a prisoner of his own past. The revelation shocked fans, but perhaps more disturbing was how long he had suffered in silence. You see, Batistuta didn't want sympathy. He wasn't trained to ask for help. Football, especially in the era he played, didn't reward vulnerability. It demanded sacrifice. It worshipped grit. So for years, he injected cortisone, laced his boots tighter, and ran through pain most of us couldn't imagine, just to keep playing. Every Sunday, he said, I'd take an injection. Then I'd run like an animal. Monday, I'd wake up and want to die. He didn't regret playing through it, but he did regret not knowing the price. No one warned him that this could happen. The clubs needed his goals, the fans needed his fire, the media needed his roar. But no one, no doctor, no coach, no federation ever told him, this might destroy you forever. It did. Medical experts would later describe his condition as post-traumatic osteoarthritis, a fancy way of saying your joints have collapsed. From where? From violence, from refusing to stop. There were whispers, always whispers, during his playing days, that he was slowing down, that he was injury-prone. But the truth was, Batistuta was being held together with tape, needles, and unbreakable will. His decline wasn't sudden. It was a long, agonizing slide, hidden behind gritted teeth and explosive goals. Every match was a trade, pain for glory, and every trade brought him closer to this nightmare. But the darkest truth? He was alone. Unlike many of his peers, Batistuta didn't bask in the limelight after retirement. He didn't become a pundit. He didn't chase coaching jobs or brand endorsements. He withdrew, not because he was bitter, but because he was in agony. His days were filled with hospital visits, surgeries, rehab sessions that often ended in tears. He tried alternative therapies, stem cells. At one point, he had screws and pins implanted in both ankles just so he could walk again. And slowly, painfully slowly, he began to reclaim small pieces of his life. But the damage was permanent. He will never run again. He will never kick a ball again. The legs that once made him immortal had turned into relics of torment. Yet Batistuta never blamed football. Not publicly. Not even once. "I love the game," he said. "I gave it everything. It took everything. That's the deal." Still, you can hear the ache in his voice. Not just physical, but emotional. Because the world moved on without him. While Ronaldo and Messi built legacies, Batistuta disappeared from the conversation. No Ballon d'Or, no FIFA recognition, just faded highlight reels and aging fans whispering, "He was incredible once." The pain wasn't just in his bones, it was in being forgotten. In Argentina, a country obsessed with football, where players become gods, Batistuta was never truly worshipped. He didn't dance like Maradona. He didn't float like Messi. He roared, he charged, he bled. And maybe that's why he never fit the myth. He didn't sell shirts. He didn't kiss badges. He didn't build a brand. He just played until it destroyed him. In a haunting quote, Batistuta once said, "If I had known this would happen, I might have stopped earlier. But I couldn't. I wanted to be the best. I had to prove something." To whom? To coaches who doubted him? To fans who wanted more? To himself? We may never know. But what we do know is this. Batistuta's story isn't just a football tragedy. It's a cautionary tale of sacrifice and silence, of glory chased without warning, of a system that rewards pain and forgets the wounded. And through it all, he never asked for pity. He simply wanted to walk again. Today, after multiple surgeries, Batistuta can walk short distances. He can stand. He can live without the pain that once made him beg for amputation. But the scars, visible and invisible, remain. And so does the question that no one in football dares to answer. How many more legends are silently suffering? There's a certain cruelty in how football remembers its heroes, and how it forgets them. In the case of Gabriel Batistuta, the silence speaks volumes. No grand farewell, no recurring mentions in all-time debates, no global campaigns praising his loyalty, his sacrifice, or his thunderous poetry on the pitch. Instead, what lingers is a shadow, the image of a man brought to his knees, not by defenders, but by the game itself. At Hall of Legends, we don't just tell stories of greatness. We search for the cracks, the fault lines that run beneath the glory. Batistuta's career isn't simply a highlight reel of net-busting goals and lion-hearted performances. It's a brutal meditation on what it costs to be great. And the cost, in Batistuta's case, was everything. It's easy to admire a player's passion when they score in a derby. It's easy to applaud loyalty when someone stays at a club through relegation. But it's harder, almost uncomfortable, to confront the reality that such loyalty often goes unrewarded. That the physical and emotional toll of playing through injury is not just pain, but invisible decay. Batistuta was never a media darling. He wasn't made for commercial campaigns. He didn't charm journalists. He didn't play politics in the locker room. What he did, and did better than almost anyone, was score. Violently, reliably, selflessly. And yet, despite his gifts, he was consistently overlooked for individual honors. No Ballon d'Or, no FIFA World Player of the Year, no global farewell tour. Why? Because Batistuta's style was old school. He belonged to a dying breed, the kind of player who didn't talk about legacy, who didn't carefully curate a public persona. He just played, and suffered, and played again. That begs the question, was Batistuta a wasted genius, or the victim of a brutal, indifferent system? We'd argue both. His talent was unquestionable. At his peak, he was a better finisher than Shevchenko, more ferocious than Raul, and more complete than Inzaghi. Coaches feared him, defenders dreaded him, teammates trusted him, and yet he never played for Real Madrid or Milan or Barcelona. He didn't chase trophies, he chased purpose. But football doesn't always reward purpose. It rewards visibility, hype, narrative. And in that game, Batistuta was always one step behind. He sacrificed his body for Fiorentina, and later Roma, while others chased glory in bigger clubs. He accepted pain as part of the job, but the system didn't tell him that pain would become permanent. That one day, when the boots came off, the agony wouldn't. And where were the clubs, the federations, the agents, when he was crying on his bathroom floor? That's the darker truth. Not just about Batistuta, but about football itself. This is a sport that makes legends, but often discards the broken. There's no pension for loyalty, no monument for suffering. Just fleeting memories and YouTube compilations that don't show the limp or the injections or the silent screams. So we ask you, our audience, to reflect. Was Batistuta forgotten too soon? Or did we never truly see him at all? Was he just the man with the thunderous right foot? Or was he something deeper, something sadder? And more importantly, how many others like him are out there, limping through retirement, erased from memory, haunted by the very game they once gave life to? Batistuta doesn't want pity. He never has. But he deserves recognition. Not just for the goals, not just for the loyalty, but for enduring what no player should ever endure, and still walking, however slowly, through the fire. We remember him not because he was perfect, but because he was real. Because he roared until he couldn't stand. Because he loved football, even when it broke him. That, to us, is the true mark of a legend. He walks now, not like he once did, not with the swagger of a man who once made stadiums quake, but he walks. And perhaps for Gabriel Batistuta, that is enough. Time has softened the edges of his pain, but not the sharpness of his story. In the quiet of retirement, he's found peace in the simple things. Family, his ranch, the occasional interview where he speaks not with bitterness, but with honesty. There are no statues of him in Florence, but there should be. There are no Netflix documentaries made in his name, but there could be. What there is, though, is memory. For those who saw him play, really saw him, Batistuta wasn't just a goal scorer. He was a force of nature, a hurricane in human form. His goals weren't just numbers, they were moments. Moments when everything stopped, when the world held its breath and then erupted. But more than that, he was a man who stayed when others left, who endured when others rested, who suffered when no one was watching. And that kind of quiet courage doesn't fade. It echoes. Ask any Fiorentina fan who the greatest striker in their history is. The answer is immediate. Ask Argentinians who led the line with fire in the 90s. His name will surface again. You may not find him in every top 10 list curated by algorithms and clicks. But in the hearts of those who understand football's deeper truths, Batistuta lives on. He gave the game his youth, his body, his peace. And though it broke him, he never turned away from it. That kind of love is rare. He once said, "I wanted to be the best. I did everything I could, and if I paid a price, so be it." In a sport obsessed with glitter, Batistuta was steel. In a world chasing comfort, he chose pain. And in a game that forgets too easily, we remember. Not because he asked to be remembered, but because legends like him don't fade. They settle deep in the soul of the sport. Some stories were never meant to be told, but now, you know.